Okay. I do hope that you've seen the email I sent you yesterday about where we are in class. Right? So let me very quickly repeat that. So we're already done with the most important part of the class. Okay? That is learning the definitions. So a big part of the work is having a common language, right? Knowing the right concepts to be able to think about what we want to think about. Okay? So we wanted to learn and think about macroeconomics. That requires the basic definitions, right? What is macroeconomics? We wanted to say things like, Turkey is growing. What is growing, right? So now we agree that we're talking about the GDP. When we say things are getting more expensive, right? We know that we're talking about the price level getting higher. We know that we're talking about inflation, okay? So those were the basic definitions that we had to have in place before we did anything else. So today we're going to begin with the analysis, right? Now that we have the language in place, we want to be able to say things like, because growth is very high, inflation is high. Does this make sense? Right? Does this have to be the case? Is there a relationship between inflation and growth? Well, we have to introduce some machinery for that, right? So that's the job. This is going to take about 2 weeks. And we're going to keep on doing the same thing, the same conceptual exercise in slightly more complicated ways, okay? So here's what we're going to do. This is the question. How is GDP determined? Okay? So when you look at an economy, what is the question that you ask? Where do you expect to see production, right? And we're going to do this in stages. We're going to first say, let's think about a world where, the actual potato economy. There's a single good and no price, okay? So there's only the potato. In a world where there is only the potato, what is the price? That's exactly right. Okay, one potato is worth one potato. There's not even a price. Okay, so that's the kind of world we're going to think of first. That's not a very reasonable world, but it helps us think. All right. So first, we're going to do no prices. Okay. Then we're going to ask the question, okay, let's allow for prices. Let's at least say, there's a price level, there are many goods. But we don't want to worry about, whether producers want to produce this much, okay? So we're going to say, assume that the price is 5, okay? How much will people want to use goods and services, right? We're going to ask that question. We will not ask at that point whether producers want to produce that much, okay? So the 101 people will recognize this as the supply curve being flat, okay? Producers are willing to supply unlimited quantities at that price. So we only want to think about demand, okay? Only, and this is going to be the key word here, only aggregate demand. Okay? This is going to be the sequence. 1, no prices. 2, only aggregate demand. Then 3, aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Okay? So this is going to be today. Perhaps we'll get to this a little bit today, but this is mostly going to be Wednesday, and this is going to be next week. Once we're done with this, essentially the rest is just the fun of the class, okay? We're going to ask all of the questions we really wanted to ask. What should the central bank do, right? When you're in a recession, what should fiscal policy do? Those are the things that are fun, that we want to think about, okay? But this is the machinery. This is the machinery we have to have in place before we can talk about those, all right? Now, the one difficulty you're going to have with this is the following. We're going to spend quite a bit of time today thinking about why the aggregate demand curve is downward sloping, okay? And you will be almost hardwired to say, when prices go up, quantity demanded decreases, okay? That's a correct answer in microeconomics. That's not even an answer for anything in macroeconomics, okay? So this is one of those few places where your microeconomics reasoning is not going to help you much, for the following reason. Give me a good. Ooh. Water. Okay. When the price of water increases, quantity demanded for water decreases. Do we agree on this? Yes. That was rather easy. Okay? Even on an early Monday morning, we agree on this. Why? Okay. Marginal utility. This is useful. So, has anyone heard of income and substitution effects? Those are actually useful concepts, right? The key reason why, when the price of water increases, quantity demanded decreases is because water has become relatively more expensive, right? When I say the price of water has increased, did I say anything about the price of Coke? No. Did I say anything about the price of milk? No. So you demand less water, but more other things, right? Well, that kind of depends on the substitution effect. Well, no, that depends on the income effect. So you surely demand less water because of the substitution effect, okay? You're saying water has become relatively more expensive. Other things' prices have been constant. Water's price has increased, and therefore I'm going to want less water, right? Now think of the macroeconomics bit of this. I'm telling you that the aggregate price level has increased, okay? The price of what has increased? Everything, okay? Right? In macroeconomics, we're thinking about the aggregates. The aggregate price level has increased. Everything is more expensive, okay? Am I telling you that something has become relatively more expensive? No. Okay? The price of everything has gone up. Are we talking about a substitution effect here? That's why it isn't very obvious why you would have a downward sloping aggregate demand curve. Okay? Now, this takes a lot of getting used to because this sounds like the stupidest question ever, right? You know, when prices increase, quantity demanded increases, duh. Okay? That reasoning doesn't quite make sense in macroeconomics. It's going to turn out that that's the case. Okay? There's a downward sloping aggregate demand curve. But we'll have to think about, wait, why is this here? Okay? So the difficult part is understanding why the question is a meaningful question. Okay? It seems obvious, you have to convince yourselves that it's not that obvious. Okay, so let's do this we're going to do this in stages, right? We're going to do this once. You're going to kind of understand it. And then this isn't hard. It is not hard in the sense of, it's not mathematically difficult. It's not, tricky, but it's subtle, okay? It's sweet, but it takes some getting used to. So we're going to talk about this a couple of times so that you're comfortable with it. Our friend in this endeavor is going to be the concept of aggregate expenditure, total spending, okay? Total spending on goods and services produced in Turkey. Aggregate expenditure, okay? Who spends? Do you spend? Yes. We call that consumption. right? When you spend. So aggregate expenditure consists of consumption, okay? If I build a factory, am I also spending? Somebody say no. Have some water. The second thing that comes very unnatural to people is the question, where does investment fall? Okay? Is it, when investment increases, does supply increase or does demand increase? Okay, I haven't even defined what is supply, what is demand, but the answer is demand increases. All right? Here's the reason. What is investment? Investment is what you do today to increase the capital stock so that you will increase production in the future. Right? Yes. So when I do investment today, do I suddenly have more goods and services today? No. Or am I using existing goods and services for future purposes? So if I want to use existing goods and services, am I supplying these? Am I demanding these? Thank you. Okay? So is investment a production activity or a spending activity? Good. So the second part of expenditure is investment spending. Okay? This sounds very counterintuitive, right? It takes some getting used to. But it is correct. And world makes better sense if you convince yourselves of this. Okay? When investment spending goes up, there are fewer goods and services left for consumption. Okay? You're asking, look, we produce this mountain of potatoes. Okay? You could eat those, or you could invest them. But you can't do both with them. Okay? That's spending. What else? It should be quite clear where this is going, right? Once you begin to C plus I. Very good. Exports and government spending, right? Does the government spend on goods and services? Sure, right? And foreigners also spend on our goods and services. Okay? So we have exports. But then we also have to subtract imports here because who was this? When he said he consumes, right? Does he know whether he's consuming on Turkish goods and services or foreign goods and services? Both of them, right? This is the measurement issue. When we say consumption, this is total consumption. Consumption of Turkish board markers and foreign board markers. Turkish shoes and foreign shoes. Okay? So we have to take out the foreign stuff. Therefore, once we do this, what is left is consumption, investment, government spending, and exports of goods and services produced in Turkey. Okay? Now this looks awfully like the GDP. Is it the GDP? No. Right? So, see, the math isn't difficult. I'm fairly certain none of you found this addition difficult math. But the concepts aren't very easy. Okay? I've written what looks like the same summation for GDP. Okay? But now I'm calling this aggregate expenditure. And I'm arguing that this does not have to be the same thing as GDP. Okay? Here's the reason. This is what we want to do. Okay? This is a desired spending. GDP is what actually happens. Are these always the same? Let's leave this question out there, okay? And let's do the analysis. Let's try to relate this to GDP, right? That's going to be easy. So what we want to do is we want to ask, what determines your consumption? That was rather easy, right? Your consumption depends on your income, okay? When we say income in macroeconomics, what are we talking about? And we have a name for that. How do we measure production? GDP. Thank you. Right. The GDP is the answer to many questions. Okay? We measure production by the GDP, and since production is income, GDP is your income. Okay? Here's a trick question. Can you choose to spend all of your income? Yeah, I hear the correct mumblings. Let's ask someone new today. For example, let's ask this gentleman. Yes. We measure the GDP. We know that the total income in the country is whatever, okay? 100 million liras, right? Is the Turkish GDP 100 million liras?
More than.
Okay, that was helpful. How much more? What was the Turkish, so we don't know the 2009 numbers yet, okay? What was the Turkish GDP in liras in 2008? Should be somewhat more than that. Are you talking about in dollar terms or in lira terms?
I think it was dollars.
Okay. So in dollars it makes more sense. In liras that's going to be more than that. Although after having taken like this many weeks of economics classes and having done your homeworks on, looking at these, one hopes that you would just take a look at the numbers, right? Okay. So just so that our life is easy, let's say it's 100 million liras. We've done 100 million liras worth of production. So is total income equal to 100 million?
No.
How can the answer be no? We did the production. Isn't the value of production equal to wages, rents? What else? Interest, one more. Profits. Wages, rents, interest, and profit have to equal to the value of production. Right? In fact, this is one way how we can calculate how much production we did. Okay? So, does total income have to be equal to total production? Does total income have to be equal to total production?
Yes.
Yes. Okay? So, there are two separate questions. Is total income equal to GDP? Yes. GDP is income. The question I'm asking is different. Can you choose to spend all of your income? Say you own a firm and you had profits of 40 million liras. Can you spend 40 million liras? Okay, so here's the question. Hang on. Spending here means, do you have control over the 40 million? Okay? You did production, 40 million is profits. All right? Do you get to say, I'm going to spend 30 million of, I'm going to consume 30 million of this and save 10 million of this? Or does the government come and say, wait, I'm going to take 5 million of those first, and then you decide what to do with the rest? The government tends to, yes, the government tends to do this, right? It comes and says, I'm going to take my share. We have a name for this. What is it called? Very good. It's called taxes. Okay? So one of the things that we have to keep in mind is, while total income is the GDP, the total income that you get to choose whether you want to spend or whether you want to save isn't the GDP, right? It has to be the GDP minus the taxes. So the terminology we have for this is disposable income. Okay? And read your book. Okay? This was in the first chapter that you were supposed to read. I didn't need this concept until now. I didn't define it. Okay? But I did tell you to read the book. And the book is good for, not many things, but it's at least good for this. Disposable income is total income, that is the GDP, minus taxes, okay? Plus transfers. Because transfers were also in that chapter, you're supposed to know what transfers are. What is a transfer? Good. Unemployment insurance. Do we have that in Turkey? Yes. Yes, we do. Okay? Retirement benefits. Say you're a retiree. Okay? If you're retired, are you doing production? Let's say you're properly retired, okay? Outside the labor force, retired. Are you doing production? No. Are you producing value? No. Do you get income? Yes. You get your retirement benefits, right? Should we add those to the GDP?
No.
Why not? There's no production, right? The whole point of GDP was to measure production, okay? Retirement benefits are just reallocation of the same income, okay? You're taking from someone, giving to someone else, okay? Those are the transfers. The government takes from you in taxes, gives to you in terms of transfers, okay? And then also does government spending. In general, we lump these two into one thing. We call this taxes, okay? Net taxes. Taxes minus transfers is just, we could do this the semester wrong, okay? We could say disposable income is GDP minus taxes plus transfers, but just calling this GDP minus net taxes makes our lives easier, okay? So we're not going to worry about the transfers. The concept of disposable income is very important for us because remember, we want to think about consumption. What determines consumption, okay? When do you consume more? The first answer was when you have more income. The proper answer is when you have more disposable income, right? If your income goes up, but your taxes go up as well, okay? And as much, okay? Your income increased by 50 liras, your taxes also increased by 50 liras. What happens to your consumption? Thank you, okay? So it is the disposable income that matters, okay? And for our purposes, at least at the beginning of this class, we're going to say, since there are no prices and nothing else, there is only disposable income, okay? Consumption increases when disposable income increases. This is one of the favorite 102 equations, okay? Consumption is A plus B, disposable income. Now, let's think about this deep mathematical equation. Kind of like it. Would we think that this B number would be a positive number or a negative number? Why? Yeah. Do you expect people who have more disposable income to consume more? One of the easier questions in life. Okay? So you're telling me that this B would be positive. Okay. We'll come back to this. What about A? What on earth is this? If you have no, remember that income is a flow concept, right? This is income per month, income per year, okay? If you don't have any income today, do you not consume anything and die of hunger? In general, people have some savings, and even if they don't have any income, right, any disposable income, they consume out of their savings, right? So this says, even if this is zero, consumption isn't zero. So do we think that this A is zero, negative, positive? Okay, very good. So A isn't very interesting. B is quite interesting, though. Here's a question. So we decided that this A guy will be positive. Okay? We also decided that B is positive. Okay? And the question is this all we can say about B? Okay? So here's the key question that you should think of. Okay? Let's see. So B is the answer to which question? You're all, calculus fellows, so you understand that, when you take the derivative of C with respect to disposable income, you get B. Calculus isn't actually just math fun, Okay? It comes handy for economists. What does it say? It says when there is a small, tiny little change in disposable income, okay? What is a small, tiny change in consumption? Okay? Okay? We call that a marginal change. What does marginal mean? Not derivative. It's related to that, but it's not derivative itself. What does marginal mean? Yep. The latest additional bit. Okay? Now, before you took any economics, you heard this word used twice in your lives, right? When you were going to primary school, you had margins in your notebooks. Right? Is that related to marginal? Sure, the bit at the end. That's what it is. Okay? So, you know, you saw the guy with green hair and tattoos and whatever walking around and called marginal. Is that related? Sure. Think of the distribution of people. Okay? So, you know, your mother has some normality idea in her mind, right? You know, what should a decent Turkish boy look like? Okay? And there's a distribution. It's good if the boy, you know, wears a tie and is clean shaven and blah blah. It's not too bad if the hair is a little long, right? You know, it's livable if there are some, perhaps, tattoos somewhere invisible, right? But the distribution, we're stretching the distribution, right? We're adding more and more marginal guys. Okay? So marginal is the additional bit at the end. Okay? And B is the answer to the question, how much of your marginal disposable income do you consume? If I give you 1 more lira in disposable income, how much of that would you consume? Okay? Do we agree on what this measures in mathematical terms? Okay? We're not doing much economics yet, right? This is just defining what a slope coefficient is. Okay? The economics of this comes from asking the following question. If I give you 1 more lira to spend, okay, to potentially spend, if I give you 1 more lira of disposable income, can you spend none of it? Sure. That's what this says, right? I guess. Then this says this could be equal to 0 as well, right? You could choose to spend none of it. Okay? Can you spend 2 liras of it? Huh. What exactly does it mean that you're spending 2 liras out of the marginal 1 lira that you receive? Can you do this? Is this physically possible? Again, B measures, and we're going to have a name for this obviously, right? B measures how much of the marginal disposable lira you choose to consume, okay? You could consume none of it, okay? Could you consume all of it? Can you consume more than all of it? That doesn't make much sense, okay? So, can this thing be, say, 0.1? Sure. Can it be 0.9? Sure. Can it be 1.7? Ah. It says this guy has to be between 0 and 1. Of the marginal lira that you get, you could choose at least to consume none of it, at most to consume all of it. Okay? And we're going to confine ourselves to the world where this thing is strictly between 0 and 1. Okay? And we're going to call this guy marginal propensity, sometimes to consume, sometimes of consumption. Of consumption. Okay? Now let's think of these words. Consumption, yeah, obviously, right? It's what relates income to consumption. Okay? Marginal, yeah, obviously, is what relates marginal disposable income to marginal consumption. What on earth is propensity? Does anyone know what this is called in Turkish? Eğilim. Marjinal tüketim eğilimi. Okay? How much of your marginal income are you inclined to consume? Okay? What is the rest? If you're not consuming, what are you doing? You're saving, okay? So marginal propensity of consumption plus marginal propensity of saving has to be 1, right? You either consume or save. We're going to work with this. All right, so if you understood this, we're about done, okay? This was the difficult part. And it wasn't difficult at all. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to say, good. Now that consumption is A plus B plus disposable income, and therefore consumption is A plus B plus GDP minus taxes, right? That's the definition of disposable income. Okay? I have something that relates GDP to aggregate expenditure. How smart I am. Okay? Now, can I bring some economics reasoning to say, oh yes, the relationship should be this? Okay? Can I use this to pin down what GDP should be? 5 minutes break, and we're going to do that. Okay?